You're now listening to episode 27 of the Real Estate CPA podcast.
Your source for all things real estate, accounting, and tax. Here we reveal our secrets that can save you thousands in taxes, streamline your accounting process, and help grow your business. Stay tuned to hear insightful interviews with industry experts, successful real estate investors, and current clients on what strategies they use to grow their business and how they steer clear of Uncle Sam.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. Brandon Hall and Thomas Costelli here today with multifamily investor and high-performance business coach Rod Khleif to discuss where he believes we are in the real estate market cycle, the psychology of success, and more. Rod is a passionate real estate investor who has personally owned and managed over 2,000 apartments and homes. As one of the country's top real estate, business, and peak performance luminaries, Rod has also built over 23 businesses in his 40-year business career, several which have been worth tens of millions of dollars. Before we jump right into today's episode, we want to remind you about our virtual workshops. They are not a webinar, but rather our virtual workshops are a highly interactive experience that puts you in a room with our tax strategists as well as fellow real estate investors. We will discuss a topic for the first 15 to 20 minutes and then open the room up for questions. This is the perfect opportunity to get answers to those real estate tax and accounting questions that you've been dying to ask, while at the same time discovering what other real estate investors are asking. You could sign up for our virtual workshops by visiting therealestatecpa.com/virtual-workshop or by following the link in the show notes below. And without further ado, let's jump right into today's episode. So, Rod, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Could you give our listeners a little bit of a background on how you got started in the real estate space and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, Thomas. I appreciate you and Brandon having me on the show. So, oh boy, let me just go back a little ways. I immigrated to this country when I was 6 years old. We ended up in Denver, Colorado. Didn't have much money. In fact, I wore clothes from the Goodwill and we ate expired food. And, my mom bought powdered milk because that's all we could afford. But my mom had a really strong work ethic and she babysat kids so we'd have extra money, a lot of kids. And with her babysitting money, she bought the house across the street from us when I was 14 for around $30,000. When I was 17, she told me it had gone up $20,000 while she slept. So I said, I'm getting into real estate. So I got into real estate, didn't make any money my first year, maybe 8 to 10 grand. Second year, around the same. But my third year, I made over $100,000. And I say that because like on my podcast, I'll talk about the psychology of success and really in mindset. And that's really what made the difference between year 2 and year 3. But if you fast forward to today, I've owned over 2,000 houses, multiple apartment communities and apartment buildings in 3 states. And I've had really incredible successes and I've had equally spectacular failures, which I call seminars. And I've had some flaming seminars. I love real estate. I love talking real estate, and I'm excited to dig in with you guys.
Awesome. So it sounds like you've been through potentially a few market cycles, and I know you mentioned 2008. Mm-hmm. Where do you believe that we currently are today?
Oh, we're without question at the top. In fact, I just interviewed a guy on my show that's got the 10th largest real estate company in the country, a Keller Williams franchise, and a really sharp guy named David Osborne. And he's already seen a major slowdown in, sales in his, with his 2,000 plus agents. So, it could be starting already. So, I think we're at the top of the market cycle. I mean, to give you a little bit of an interesting caveat, in 2006, my net worth went up $17 million while I slept, just a little bit more than my mom's 20,000. But the punchline is 2008. I lost it all in 2008. I lost about $50 million real money in that correction. So I'm very in tune with now with real estate corrections based on my own personal experiences.
Yeah. So if you don't mind kind of going more into that, I think a lot of our listeners would love to hear about maybe strategies, knowing that we're at the top now, or you think that we're at the top now.
Yeah, I mean it's conjecture for sure. I mean, who knows? If I knew for sure, I'd be a billionaire and on the back of my yacht.
Right, exactly.
But I've been through enough of these cycles to recognize the signs, the fervor, the excitement. In fact, in my opinion, the overpaying. But I'll give you an
do it on
example.
HGTV. I can do it, right?
Right. That's it. I mean, that's it. It flip like crazy. So in fact, I just talked to a coaching client that's doing a flip in LA. And I will tell you, if you're listening and you're a flipper, I would be very cautious of the high dollar ones right now. Those are when the music stops, those are the people that typically get hurt first. If you're in the moderately priced stuff that'll sell FHA and VA, no worries. But, let me give you an example of some of the market cycles I've been through. In the late 80s, I used to buy houses and I didn't really flip them. I'd fix them up and maybe I'd sell them after a year or two. But I bought this house, paid, I think, $57,000 for it, sold it for $75,000 a year or two later. Well, the market crashed in the late 80s. I bought that same house back for $18,000. Then exact same house. And then I ultimately sold it, I don't know, a few years later for $160,000. So that's, talk about a market cycle. But my real estate here in Florida, I was at a 30% loan to value. So I didn't owe more than 30 cents on every dollar. And I went upside down. That's how much it crashed here.
That's crazy. So going through that and feeling that we're at the top now, what are you doing, or what steps do you recommend that investors take to insulate themselves from some sort of potential pullback?
Well, I wrote a book on this very topic because of what happened to me. It's called How to Create Lifetime Cash Flow Through Multifamily Properties. But the subtitle is The New Rules of Real Estate Investing. The new rules being focus on cash flow. Value is out the window. Value is irrelevant. When I made $17 million on paper in 2006, I got a big head and I thought I was a real estate god. And, whenever that happens, God or the universe gives you a smackdown. And that was 2008 for me. But I'm going to tell you that the key here is to focus on cash flow. And be sure you're stress testing your deals. If you're in the multifamily space or even in the single family space, if you're buying to hold long term, make sure that you're stress testing your deals, looking at what will happen if you have high vacancies, looking at what will happen if your rents contract, and making sure you can weather that storm. And by the way, if your listeners are interested, my book's like a textbook for multifamily investing. I'll give it to them for free. They can just text my name, Rod, to 41411 and get a free copy. It's 200 pages and it's no fluff. It's an awesome, awesome book. But yeah, that's the thing I would tell them. And that's what I say in the book is, my eye was on the value ball instead of the cash flow ball. And, the reason that I crashed and burned, people ask me that a lot because I was at such a low loan to value. So let me tell you why it happened. So I had 800 houses. I had multiple apartment complexes, but my houses were 2 hours north of me and 2 hours south of me and everywhere in between. So that, and I'll tell you why that's a big deal, but also Florida has very high taxes and very high insurance. Okay. So, you got wind insurance, you got flood insurance because we're along the coast. I mean, we have hurricanes. And those two things coupled with the logistics of my portfolio. For example, if you've got an apartment complex, you can stockpile parts. You stockpile your plumbing parts, HVAC parts, appliance parts, all that stuff. So you can go there and do a maintenance job in a very short amount of time. Well, if you've got a house and say I've got maintenance guys, they got to drive an hour to get to the house. They have to assess what's wrong. Then they got to find a Home Depot or a Lowe's. That could be a half hour away. They go buy parts. They come back. They work on it. Then they discover, very often you dig into something, you need more parts. They have to go back again. And what could take 30 to 45 minutes at an apartment complex ends up taking all day. And you magnify that times 800, and that's what happened to me. But I thought, real estate, I thought 80 million baby boomers getting old and getting cold. Florida was recession proof. Okay, well... Well, was I wrong? Anyway, so that's the bottom line, and that's why I imploded. It just didn't quite cash flow. I had to sell a house occasionally or refinance a house occasionally, and I thought the gravy train would last forever. But yeah, that's my message to people is to focus on cash flow.
I agree with that too. I mean, we have clients that invest strictly for appreciation. We have clients that invest strictly for cash flow, and some get better numbers than others. But I do agree with you that the ones investing for cash flow or have insulated themselves more so than the others, or people that are utilizing other strategies. But let's kind of touch on that. So you had 800 units, you had these big apartment buildings. Mm-hmm. I mean, wouldn't you say that you were?
My apartments did fine.
Okay.
Yeah, through the crash, my apartments did fine. I mean, the problem is I had cross collateralized them. So I had houses with apartments in the same loans, and that's why the whole thing imploded for me. Otherwise, I'd still have those apartments. But no, and that's the message. Is that, if you're going to buy and hold, unless the houses are very close together, so if you're in the same town, fine, you'll do it fine. If they were all right here in Sarasota, I would have probably been just fine. The problem is I was all the way north of Tampa and all the way almost to Naples. If
So you
know
don't get
Florida.
the economies of scale.
Oh, it's the travel that kills you. It's the logistics of that kills you. But still, I'm of the mind that if you're going to buy property to hold long-term, for God's sakes, do multifamily. Don't do single family. It's just so much easier. You have economies of scale. You can just get further, faster, bigger, faster. And I frankly think it's safer based on my own experience.
What class asset were these apartments?
The apartments were B minus, C. The houses were C minus. The houses were small. And that was part of the problem as well. A lot of turnover. And here in Florida, I had a lot of, people in the construction industry and things like that, which got decimated, obviously, in 2008.
Yeah.
So
to insulate from any sort of pullback, from any sort of recession, you invest for cash flow. And am I hearing aim for the C to B class properties? Is there a reason that you're saying C to B, or is that just what you had at the time?
No, that was my portfolio. I now invest in C and B. That's all we look at. We fell into a 100-unit A property, but that was just by luck up in Ohio recently. But we target C and B. And there's a reason for that as well. There's always going to be a need for workforce housing. And so, that's there. Now, there's a caveat there because they're overbuilding in a lot of markets. And A-class properties are going to likely pull some of the B renters because they'll have to lower their prices if the market softens, and they'll attract some of those B renters. So you've got to manage, you've got to be looking at the absorption of tenants in your marketplace, looking at, is it being overbuilt? Could that be an issue? But, in general, multifamily seems to weather a storm fairly well as long as you stress test. Bottom line, you've got to, and even in single family, you've got to look at your rents and what happens if the rents pull back.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you're vacant for a few months? Are you going to be okay? And it's not rocket science, but you have to do it. And everybody's so caught up in this irrational exuberance right now. And this is the same thing that happened in 06 and 07, exactly the same. There's going to be some pain when the music stops. There always is. And now, will it be as bad as 08? I pray to God it isn't, and I doubt that it will be. But and we still may have a couple of years left. Who knows? Trump's.
Well, that's what I'm telling people too. It's like we all know, we all feel that we're at a top. We work with a lot of different real estate investors. We work with the GPs on syndicates. We work with GPs in real estate funds. We work with people that are flipping, developing, and profit margins across the board have gone down.
Sure.
Especially if you're out in the California area. You reference California, we're seeing the same thing. So we all
over the country, Brandon.
Right.
To find a deal right now is much, much harder, and you have to sharpen your pencil, and a lot of competition. And again, these are all signs of a market top. This is, I've been through 3 of these now, and it's the same signs every time. I just wasn't paying attention on the last one, but the only thing that makes me feel better is there are countries that went bankrupt in the last one. So, smart people, a lot smarter than me. So,
yeah. The question that I struggle with, though, is how close are we actually to that top, right? Like, it could be years.
It could be.
The economy's been propped up on this
Trump's been doing some stuff that's been helping, and love him or hate him, the economy's humming along. But they're raising the rates. The feds are making him mad and raising the rates, but I think it's smart, and it needs that. I think the cool down is smart because we were so low. I remember when 7% was fantastic. It was like I was doing backflips if I got 7%. And I'm my home here, I'm at 3.25%. It's just staggering. What was available for a long time, so it just had to go back up, and that's just the way it works.
So kind of along these same lines, we have a lot of new investors and a lot of really sophisticated, experienced investors that listen to our show. They all make mistakes. What is a mistake that you pretty much consistently see across maybe all spectrums, maybe not just the new guys, but maybe anybody and anything like that?
There are a lot of mistakes being made right now, Brandon. And the mistakes are people are not stress testing deals. We give LOIs on numerous deals. We've got 10 deals working right now, and we put an LOI in on a deal, and it's tight. It's like, okay, this is all we can pay. And then it sells for a huge amount more than we had an LOI in on. And we're like, good God, unless these people have no cost of funds, it's a train wreck waiting to happen. And so people are overpaying right now. It's bottom line. And there are a lot of syndicators out there right now. I have them on my show all the time, syndicators that have thousands of units. And it's kind of interesting that you can tell, if somebody's got 1,000 units or more, I can tell they started in 09, 10, or 11 after the crash. And so a lot of these guys have never gone through it. And of course, like I did, they get a big head and they think, they can do anything. And then the music stops. And so, that's my fear. I mean, it's not a fear really. It'll be an incredible opportunity because those properties will come back. But, with crisis comes opportunity. This contraction shouldn't be something anybody listening should fear. It's an opportunity, bottom line. There will be more money made when that happens than the run up to it. So,
yeah, I got to admit that I'm kind of waiting for
right.
that.
And we're telling our investors, keep the powder dry, preparing them, because when it happens, there's a lot of fear and investors get fearful. Oh my God, real estate's doing so bad. Well, that's the time. That's the time you want to get in. That's not the time to be fearful. The contrarians are the ones that massively, exponentially capitalize on it when it happens.
I guess it wouldn't be too far-fetched to say that a good strategy would maybe be to liquidate some of a portfolio maybe that has a large capital gain.
Being cash, right? Yeah, cash is king when a contraction happens because financing's hard to get. And if you've got cash, is absolutely king, no question. So that's always a good strategy.
Well, if anybody wants to buy a 3-unit property in Baltimore, I'm selling mine. So I've been trying to sell it for about a month now. I think I've probably missed that key buying season by
well, we're heading into the slow time, but it'll pick up again, hopefully after the first time.
I'm agreeing. I'm seeing a lot of the same thing you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
Rod, if we could shift gears just a little bit, I know that you're big into the psychology of success. What would be your top tips for creating a high performance mindset and building high performance habits?
Well, I thought you'd never ask because that's my favorite topic to talk about. I talked about how I made 10 grand my second year in real estate, which was 1980, and I made over 100,000 in 81. The difference was mindset and psychology. How did I come back? How did I come back to the lifestyle that I have right now, losing $50 million? Some people don't recover from that by focusing on what I want and why I want it. Now, if you'd like, I'm happy to take literally 2 minutes and talk about this process that I take my coaching students through to align their goals and their values so that they know, so they have a target. You want me to take a second and do that?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So here's what you do if you're listening. Pick an hour when you are uninterrupted and you're high energy. Don't do it right after a meal. Pick a time when you have a lot of energy and you won't be interrupted, and sit down and write down everything you could ever possibly want in life. Of course, all the stuff, the boats, the cars, the jet skis, the planes, the watches, and on and on and on, all the stuff. But also, write down how much money you want in the bank, write down, how much cash flow you want a month from your investments, all of those things. But take it a little further. Also write down everything you want to learn. So I want to learn how to fly helicopters. In fact, I just had a pilot here the last couple of days talking to me about that. I want to learn how to play the drums. What do you want to learn? But also write down who you want to help. So, I bought my parents a house. I took them on a cruise. I've got a foundation. What do you want to stand for? It's not just the stuff. It's everything you want to do, be, or have. So write down. And those of you that are analytical, I know there's a lot of you listening to this show. Don't analyze it. Just write it down. You can scratch it out later. Don't stop writing to think about it. Just keep writing everything you can possibly think of. Imagine that if you write it down, you're going to get it. And I'm going to tell you that is not outside the realm of reality, because what it does when you write it down is it triggers something called your reticular activating system. And that's that filter that filters out everything that's coming to your brain all the time. Like right now, if you're listening to me, you're not thinking about how your feet feel. But I'd mention it. You can think about how your feet feel. That's your reticular activating system. In fact, a great example is when you first buy a car. You never really notice them. And then when you buy it, you see them everywhere. And they were there before. You just didn't notice them. So writing it down triggers that and gets that process started. So once you can't think of another thing, then it's not real or measurable it's not real until it is measurable. So you got to put a timeline on each goal. So put how many years it's going to take you to achieve each goal. Just a number, 1, 3, 5, 10, or 20. Remembering that as human beings, we will overestimate what we can accomplish in a year and massively underestimate what we can do in a decade. So put a timeline on each goal. There's just a couple more steps. Now, once you've got a number on each goal, pick your number one goal, the juiciest one. And if there's 2 or 3 that are equally exciting, just pick one. It won't matter. Write it on a separate sheet of paper. Then pick your top 3 one-year goals and put those on a separate sheet of paper. So you've got 4 goals on a separate sheet of paper. then sit down and write down why each one of those goals is an absolute must, okay? Because it's the why that drives you. It's never the goal itself. So write down why it's a must so that I can show my wife what success looks like, so that we can do whatever we want, wherever we want, whenever we want, with whoever we want, whatever it is for you. So I can show my family what success looks like. Whatever it is, write that down. Use emotionally charged words, because words are very powerful. So use words like incredible and massive and amazing and things like that, because they'll juice you. But take it one little step further. Put some pain in there too, that if you don't achieve those goals, what's going to happen? So I don't feel like a failure. So I don't live a life of regret. So I don't feel like I failed my spouse. Whatever it is, make it painful, because we will do more to avoid pain than gain pleasure as human beings. So put some pain in there, because again, this is the fuel. This is the leverage that will push you. And then one last thing, get pictures of your goals. To give you some examples of why this is a big deal. When I turned 18, I got my real estate license, and that was the year I made like eight or nine grand. And I got a Ford four-door Granada, silver, ugliest thing you've ever seen in your life. But I figured you had to have a four-door to sell real estate, so you could show houses, people could get in and out easy and all that. Well, the person I was working with, a broker, had a Corvette. He let me drive it. Now, that's a key clue. That experiential component is important. So if you want a car, go drive it. If you want a house, go visit it on an open house. If you want something, experience it. But anyway, so I drove that Corvette within a year. Oh, and I took a picture out of a magazine. This is before you could spell internet. And I put that picture on the visor of my four-door Granada of a Corvette, picture of a Corvette. Within a year, I had one. I'll give you a couple more examples, but please know that this is not me bragging, because these things that I'm going to share with you, they don't even interest me anymore. This was the time when there was a TV show called Magnum PI, and the actor's name was Tom Selleck, and he drove this Ferrari 308, this gorgeous red Ferrari. And again, this is pre-internet, so I got a picture of that actual Ferrari, and I put it on the visor of my Corvette. I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, was that Ferrari. Within 2 years, I had a Maserati, looked just like it. My last example, I'll give you one more car example, was I always wanted a Lamborghini. I'm the guy that had the posters on his wall with the bikini girls and, washing in the soap. And yeah, that was me. I had that. But what's astounding is my son collected exotic models of cars. And I told him I was thinking about getting one, and he drove me crazy. And he told me he used to lay in bed visualizing me bringing him to school in it. But he had models of these cars, and he has a model of the exact color and style that I ended up getting, which ultimately wrecked. But pictures work. In fact, I'll show you guys, I know you're doing this on iTunes, but I've got a planner here that, for those of you that are looking on YouTube, I've got a planner in the back of this thing. I use a paper planner. Yes, I'm a dinosaur. But in the back of this thing, I've got pictures I've had in here for 20 years. Okay, the first pictures are my gratitude pictures, my children when they were very young. But then they're the things that I want. By the way, everything starts from a place of gratitude. So make sure you've got picture, make sure you incorporate gratitude into this process. But then I've got pictures of the houses that I wanted that I got, okay? Picture, a couple $100,000 worth of watches, the Lamborghini before I ever got it, the Rolls Royce, all this stuff that I got because I had pictures. Again, this stuff doesn't interest me anymore, but I just want to show you the value of this, because I know if you're analytical, if we haven't lost you already, you're probably going, oh boy, this is who'd they get on his show today? But I'm telling you that this stuff works. Okay, I've got pictures on the wall here in my office of the stuff that I want now, and ignore what I'm saying at your peril, my friends, because you've got to have the fuel to actually take action. So many people get caught in comfort or fear, and they never pull the trigger on this. I do 3-day live events, and I spend a lot of time on this because, the sad reality is 90% of the people that take a course or go to an event never do anything with it because they're afraid or they're comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, the life you want is on the other side of that fear and that comfort. But you got to know what it is you want. And you got to know why you want it. Those are the critical pieces.
I think a lot of our listeners will enjoy that. That was really good. And about halfway through there, you touched on something that really resonated with me, and that was, why are you doing it, right? So you're writing down your goals, and you're asking, why am I doing this? You talked about a fear aspect too, which was also neat, and I hadn't considered in the past. But I've started to do the why am I doing this as well, because I write my goals down. I have them in Evernote, and I've always got them pulled up on my screen. I think Thomas does the same thing. I used to frame my goals and all that stuff. But it wasn't until really recently that I really started asking, why am I actually doing this? And Thomas can probably attest to this. I recently posed the question to my entire team, why do we exist as a business? So I think it's important too to not only
Great.
Yeah, not only do this on a personal level too, but on a business level.
Bring your team in. Have them do their goals. I mean, when you align together like that, my God, magic happens, Brandon. I mean, that's awesome.
You know, as I've gone through it, so I started the business to make money, right? I wanted a lot of things you were saying. And then I realized, you know, once you get to a certain point, the money becomes less motivating. I wasn't jumping up out of bed at 6 a.m. every morning, ready to crush the day. But when you start to kind of really think about why you're doing something, that's the longer term motivation. And something that I realized is that revenue and profits are important. It's kind of like oxygen and food, right? You need oxygen and food to live. So you need revenue and profits to build a business and to grow, but it's not the end goal, right? So the revenue and profits get you so far, but to really continue growing and scaling and doing the things that you want to do, you have to have a better, more concrete why. And that's why I pulled my whole team in. I was like, guys, why do we exist as a business? What is the purpose that we're here aside from trying to make money? I mean, obviously we don't just want to say that our purpose is to prepare tax returns and, you know, do bookkeeping. Like, what are we trying to do as a firm? And it was a really cool conversation.
Oh, no, that's really smart of you to do that and to enroll them in that process, because, you know, you can come up with some really cool stuff. We help people save money. We help people build a future. We help families create a legacy. It can be all those answers to that question for your team. And when you enroll your team like that, then they're behind it. Love it. I want to add one last little caveat here to this goal setting thing I mentioned, because I just realized I forgot. So I'll give you one more goal, the big one that I always wanted. I wanted a house on the beach, and I lived in Denver, and there's no beach in Denver. And but I used to visualize it. I used to think about the palm trees, and, you know, Denver has snow on occasion, and I got tired of the snow, and I knew I wanted to live. So I ultimately built this mansion out on the beach, and it's, you know, 10,000 square feet. I had the beach on one side. It was called a Gulf to Base. On the backside, I had my boat lifts and my boat houses. Just magnificent home that I've worked for 20 years. Okay. It was a goal for 20 years. And I'm going to bring it home in a second, but there's two reasons I'm telling you this. And about 2 months after I built it, I'm floating in my pool in the backyard. My family's sleeping, and I'm looking up at this thing that I'd worked for my whole life. It's 3 stories. The pool is changing colors because it had fiber optic lighting. There's a waterfall coming from the second floor balcony into the pool. I mean, this home is magnificent. Okay.
Sounds amazing.
It was beyond. I mean, I could go on and on. I had $150,000 fish tanks. I mean, I could go on and on. Elevators
to think it up, right? I mean,
yeah, well, I did. And it was everything that I wanted, but there's a punchline. So I'm floating in this pool about 2 months after I finished the house, and I got depressed. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? How could I be depressed? I worked on this thing for 20 years. I've achieved a success people dream about, and I'm depressed. And what I didn't realize at the time was 2 things. One is you should never achieve a goal without a big one, without having other goals lined up. Because like the good book says, without a vision, the people perish. You have to have a vision for the future. And I didn't have a vision. It's like, what do I do now? So that was one. But the second thing that's equally as important is there's a big difference between being successful and being fulfilled. In fact, Tony Robbins calls it the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was totally focused on Rod. I was focused on success no matter what. And, you know, I had to prove to the world I was good enough. That's what drove me. And I'm being completely open and vulnerable here. It was to prove to the world I was good enough. But it was all focused on me. And so I went and saw Tony actually that year. I've spent 20 years following Tony around the planet. A big shout out to him. If you ever have an opportunity to see him live while he's still speaking, just do it. But I found out he fed families for the holidays. And I was really inspired by that. And so, by the way, fulfillment means to give back in some way. I mean, if you really want to feel fulfilled, you need to give back in some way. And so I decided to feed 5 families. This was like 99 or 2000. And the third family changed my life. We got these big baskets of food, and we fed them for this was for Thanksgiving. We now do it for Christmas, but we got big baskets of food. We got turkeys, and I went up to this house, this third family that we brought the food to, that, you know, this impoverished family. And this lady came out, and she saw the food and started crying. Her kids came out, they started crying. I started crying, and I was hooked. And I will tell you, I'm now blessed to say we've fed over 60,000 children here in Sarasota and Bradenton over the holidays. We've done over 10,000 backpacks filled with school supplies, done thousands of teddy bears to give to local police departments for their officers to keep in their cars when they encounter a child that's been traumatized. And it's been my greatest gift, and it's given me fulfillment. So I want to encourage your listeners, Those of you that I know you want success, if you're listening to these guys, I know you want it, you deserve it, but success without that component is not success. I've got a podcast, Lifetime Cash Flow. I hope you'll check it out. But on that show, I've interviewed billionaires and mega millionaires that frankly are hugely successful, but they're right where I was and they're not fulfilled and they're not happy because they're focused on themselves. So incorporate giving back in some fashion. That's the message I want to give. And one other thing to what you just said about your team. The goals themselves will not make you happy. They will make you feel good for a short while. I mean, that was my lifelong goal. And after 2 months, it didn't matter anymore. Progress equals happiness. You have to be growing and progressing to stay happy. So there is you need the goals. They're going to drive you, but realize that that's not going to equate to happiness long term. It's that continual growth and continual improvement and continual progress that equals happiness.
So I'm sure some of our listeners at this point are probably like, why are we talking about this on the Tax and Accounting podcast? And we'll get back to the tax accounting in a second. But I think that this is really important because even as CPAs, we do a ton of tax strategy with clients. We help them build wealth. We have had, I don't even know how many clients, right? We have had a lot of clients get to the point where they can leave their W-2 jobs and retire on the cash flow that they've built for themselves. And when that happens, it's like 3 months later that they are restless and they're trying to figure out what to do at that point. And we find ourselves almost playing like therapist, right?
No kidding.
Okay,
wow.
Mr. Client, you called us for taxes, but what's really going on here is you don't feel like you have a purpose anymore because you've achieved your goal. So let's talk about that instead. We've had clients walk out saying, oh my gosh, that was amazing. You guys are like an actual partner. You're not just this tax guy that I go to get my returns filed. So
awesome.
that's I'm glad that we've talked about all this.
Well, and those of you listening, I know there's some of you listening that have not taken action on your goals. You're analytical, so you're in analysis paralysis, but you haven't taken action. So use the goals and the whys to drive you and to push you and to get you up when you get knocked down, because you're going to have inevitable setbacks for sure. But that's awesome that because, the same thing that you said, when somebody retires from anything. In fact, a lot of people die when that happens, believe it or not. It's kind of crazy. You need a future. You need a vision for the future. You need to keep progressing.
So what we see is people will retire. They'll live on the cash flow. They'll travel around the world for like a year or two. And they'll be like, okay, well, that was what I was trying to do that was my 20-year goal.
Now what?
Right. Now what do I do?
Now what?
It's like, well, we as CPAs still want to be relevant, obviously. so we're like, hey, let's actually identify the real thing here. Oh, well, I'm a purpose. So let's go do something with this. And it's not a W-2 job, but do something like what you were saying. Let's go.
Just give back. Just give back. Just do something. And those of you listening, you don't have to do anything as grandiose as I did. I mean, just help an elderly person, help a family, adopt a family, buy the person behind you, pay their toll, or buy them a Starbucks, or do something, because I'm just going to tell you, whatever you give, you get back. Be it money, your time, love, happiness. If you want love or happiness, give love and happiness. Whatever you give, you get back. So, but those of you that want success, and I know if you're listening to these two guys, you do, make sure you incorporate that piece in some fashion, because that's a life of meaning. That's a life you want to live. It's not just about the money, my friends.
Before we just shift gears real quick into a few accounting questions, just want to say that everything you guys just talked about, 100% true. You'd be surprised you write your goals down and how quickly, if you review them, you have the pictures, how quickly you can achieve them. But just like you said, when you hit that goal, you need to have the next goal, because I always felt it's the process of achieving that goal is actually the fulfilling part.
Yes, it's the progress. It's the growth. No question. I'll tell you a funny aside. I'm in my compound here in Florida now. I have 6 buildings, incredible. Looked out over the bay, guest house, media center, conference center, huge house. And because God's got a sense of humor, I can see my old mansion across the bay there and out my backyard. but it was, I could have paralyzed, but I'm back because I focused on what I wanted and why I wanted it. And that's the message here, guys. Make sure you know why it is you're doing what you're doing. And it's so awesome that you brought your team in on that, Brendan. And the why is so critical, because that's what's going to drive you.
So that is all amazing stuff, but we are an accounting firm and we do have to go over some accounting questions, some of the boring stuff. So how do you handle your accounting and bookkeeping for your properties and your businesses overall?
Well, I would just tell those of you listening, make sure that you are aligned with an accountant that understands real estate, an accountant that understands ideally owns real estate, an accountant that understands cost segregation, saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars, accelerated depreciation. That's what cost segregation is. I'm sure you guys have talked about it on the show. But, I've aligned myself with someone like that. And of course, I've got in-house bookkeepers, but you've got to have a good accounting team, have a good engineer to do the initial part of the cost segregation if you're going to do that. But, keep your books separate. I mean, I'm sure I could go on and on about things that you guys have said on the show numerous times, but that's the bottom line, is to make sure that someone on your team knows real estate accounting. And the other piece is, and even this is me looking in the mirror, you've got to do more tax planning. Don't be reactive. Most CPAs are reactive. You need to be proactive and determine how you can maximize each year. Make sure you're taking all your deductions. And there's so many cutting edge, well, they're really not cutting edge, but very few CPAs even know about, some of the deductions that are available that I know you guys do, and people just don't take because they're unaware of them. The fact that, you can have a C Corp and I forgot what it's called, but you can pay your health insurance and it can pay all your health bills and all those things and things of that nature that, that a lot of CPAs just won't tell somebody. So the thing I would say is be proactive, and that will make you a lot of money and by saving you a lot of money.
That C Corp strategy is, I believe, called captive entities, if anybody's interested in looking that up at some point. Real quick question for you, Rod. So with the accounting sides, we've interviewed a lot of syndicators who pretty much say the same thing. It's get an accounting team and just get rid of it, offload it. And, a constant point that we try to consistently hit on is the trust that builds with your investors. So if you're trying to raise capital and you don't have an accounting team in place, how much trust are you potentially losing with those investors that you're trying to raise capital from?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, if you're syndicating properties, you're going to want an accountant to help you create your pro formas in most cases, to lay it all out, to calculate all the benefits from a particular deal that you're considering. But, it's a critical component on the team without question. It's important. It's as important as a real estate broker. It's as important as a property manager. You've got to have a great CPA on your team.
We have to agree with that.
Well, yeah, it's a little self-serving, but yes, you guys do have to agree with that.
Yeah. Well, here's a question for you, Rod. We were at an event a while ago, and there was this syndicate there, this fund guy there, manager there, and he was trying to answer questions around the tax aspects and the accounting aspects of his fund. So investors were peppering him with tax and accounting aspects of his fund. At what point do you say, I'm actually going to have my CPA fly into the event and answer the questions for you? At what point does that just become a cost of doing business?
Well, I'm going to tell you that luckily I've got a CPA on my team. And everyone should have a Robert. I have a Robert, and he's a CPA. And so when there's a question that pops up that's tax related, I absolutely defer to him. But, most people don't have that luxury. So you need to have, that component on your team, and you need to understand your deal well enough so you can explain most tax related questions away. But I will tell you, even the most seasoned syndicators will have things that stymie them and that, we're like, oh crap, I don't even know how to answer that. And they should say, I don't know how to answer that, but I will find out for you. And then they call you guys, right?
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, well, Rod, when it comes to technology, what would you say is your favorite piece of technology you are using currently in your business?
I can't even spell technology. Okay, so you're asking the wrong guy that one. I don't even know how to effectively use my iPhone. Now, my wife, if she was here, I would have her tell you how to use this. But I think
we got you on Zoom, right?
I do know how to use Zoom. I use Zoom on my podcast as well, and that, thank God. But I have an AV team that helps me with that too. And like Henry Ford, they used to say he was dumb, but he had a phone on his desk and he could call and ask a question for anything he needed. Not that I'm going to compare myself to Henry Ford, but that's kind of how I roll as well. So, as far as tech, we love Zoom. We use Asana and Slack. We just started using that. We love it. Slack especially, because it eliminates a lot of the interoffice emails. And so that's happening right now. What else? We were using Microsoft Teams, but we're going to use Slack and Asana now. So
we love Slack. We've actually gotten our clients, so the clients like you that are running these syndications and funds, we put them on Slack.
Oh, that's
and
good.
we say, this is how you're going to communicate with us rather than go through emails. Way more effective.
Love it. Much more efficient, more productive for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, if our listeners wanted to contact you, what would be the best way to do that?
Well, listen, guys, obviously I've got my podcast. We're at 4.5 million downloads. So I'm doing something right. If you're interested in multifamily real estate, I hope you'll check it out. It's called Lifetime Cash Flow. I also have a Facebook group that's got 21,000 people in it. They can go to multifamilycommunity.com, and it's a direct link to that Facebook group. You know, you are the 5 people you hang around with, and you want to be around people that want more, that want to grow, that want to, build a life. And so that's a great place to look for those people. But my website has got a ton of my book. My book is free. It's 200 pages. It's no fluff. And like most people that give stuff away, this thing is like a textbook. And just text Rod to 41411 and I'll give you a free copy of that. But my website has a ton of free stuff on it. RodKleif.com, videos, a couple other books that I wrote that are free, a lot of articles that I either write or I curate, and it's just incredible resource for anybody for real estate related and frankly, psychology success related. On my podcast, I don't just do interviews with hitters. Every week I do a segment on the psychology of success, which it's only 5 minutes, but it doesn't matter if you're not into real estate, you'll enjoy those. But my website is rodkhleif.com, KHLEIF as in Frank.com. And I do a live event every quarter. I don't know when this will air, but I've got one coming up in Tampa, November 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And then Atlanta's in November 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Tampa's January 18th, 19th, and 20th. And 3 days of me on stage, grinding it out, teaching you how to buy multifamily. So if anybody's interested in that, I'd love to see you there. You'll be glad you came. And that's multifamilybootcamp.com. That wasn't enough websites there.
Awesome. Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on the show. A lot of the stuff that you said was amazing, kind of inspired me to go back, review my goals, kind of ask myself why I'm doing kind of what I'm doing. And
awesome.
I'm sure it's definitely going to provide a ton of value to our audience. And thanks again for coming on.
My pleasure, guys. Go get them. It's a pleasure to meet you guys. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed the show, please find us on iTunes and leave us a review. You can also email us at contact@therealestatecpa.com with any feedback or topic suggestions. We are always taking on new clients, and with the new tax laws in play, you really don't want to navigate this alone. Let us help you save money on taxes and with your accounting and CFO needs. To become a client, navigate to our client page at therealestatecpa.com and fill out a web form with as much detail about your situation as possible. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great rest of your week.